Quarantined Experiment 41, Basement Dweller Report 2. Is it too much to ask that we find the doctor? He's been missing for around 9 months now, and the last time he was seen, he was fighting his way out of the agency base he was stationed at. The former senior researcher, Washington, real name Dr. Harris Fimzar, is a highly dangerous man. That much is obvious. But how is it that one man can hide from the full resources of the agency? We know that somehow he had made himself invisible to the gaze of the web eater. But even with the agent training that all researchers go through and maintain, how is it he's basically a ghost in the wind? If he was content to vanish, that would be one thing. But we keep on stumbling on more and more of his twisted experiments. That they're getting more twisted and inhuman as we go deeper into his research is worrying. Especially with Quarantined Experiment number 41. How did the doctor get his hands on a sample of the basement dweller fungus? Pretty sure that every spore was destroyed last year. The only way he could have gotten a sample would either be in the wild, which is very rare, and our agents were very concise in wiping out that species. The other option is that the doctor took it from the agency base, and that means our security has been massively compromised by this one clever old man. Don't know which option is worse. Either our agents missed a portion of the human-eating fungus, or there's backdoors into the agency that we were unaware of. As a reminder, the basement dweller is a cordyceps variation, a parasitic fungus that went from infecting the larvae of insects to infecting humans. The infection spreads rapidly to the brain and completely takes over the body of its host. The damage of such infection usually destroys all intelligent thought, reverting the host to a primal, almost animal-like state of being. The fungus will then drive them to feed and gorge themselves on whatever organic material they can get their hands on. An extreme case of the mental disorder of pica, where a person digests non-digestible things. While a human digestion system couldn't handle things like wood chips or wall stuffing, a human infected by the basement dweller will consume whatever they can shove in their mouth. And when not eating, the infected host will attack whatever living thing that could be sensed. And even a scratch from an infected human has a high probability of spreading the infection. After the host is stuffed to the gills, the basement dweller will force the host to climb to the highest point in the house the host is in. From the basement it usually grows in, to the attic or roof. Then the host will spawn bright crimson-caped mushrooms all over their body. These caps will then messily explode, spreading spores in every direction, light enough to be carried by the winds. The action usually means the death of the host, as the explosion tends to be messy. The only answer, found by the agency, is to use thermite to burn the fungus at an insanely high temperature. Because the fungus is highly resistant to heat, cold, and most fungicides. There have been maybe 5 outbreaks of the basement-dwelling fungus in the last 100 years, and each time was an absolute burden on the agency to contain. So that the doctor got his hands on it and did his usual experimentation on it is nightmare-inducing. It wasn't even known to be a case of the basement dweller. It started as the police getting a call of strange noises that came from an abandoned house, thinking it was a homeless person that broke into the house to avoid the harsh winter. Later, the voice examination, the call to the police matches the sound profile of Fimzar when he was employed by the agency. So the cops got there, and as their house was abandoned, they were able to enter without needing a warrant or anything, especially as they heard loud noises coming from the house. Most of the house was wrapped down in plastic sheeting, as the owners had long stopped coming to their backup house, mainly keeping it for the property location. But the investigating officers saw a light in the distance, and what the agency took from their body cams was horrific. From the basement and spreading all over the house were white fungal growths that spawned hundreds of red mushrooms. As they moved further into the house, they were increasing in mass up until they were covering most of the walls. The trail and the light led to the basement, where they heard someone begging for help. Rushing to the person's aid, the good officers got to the basement and saw that the fungal growths all originated from the begging figure. It resembled a person if all the hair fell out and had fungal growths completely consume their bodies. The victim begging was fused to the wall, begging for someone to help them. When they saw the officers, they screamed to get away, and right after that, they didn't want to die. They begged the officers to go away, but to help them. One of the officers adopted a soothing tone as he got closer. "It'll be okay, son. Give us a moment to get you down into the hospital." He got closer, and the person trapped on the wall screamed louder. "No, don't get closer. Help me, mother," they screamed, half mad, half sobbing. The officer made contact with the person on the wall. Their skin turned a bright crimson red, and then the person exploded into spores. The officer at point-blank range had no chance to get away. His partner at the distance wasn't far enough not to get caught in the explosion of spores. The fungus spread rapidly, first on their clothes, then their flesh, finally on the insides of their bodies. The pain of the invasions of their bodies knocked the two officers out. When they woke up, they painfully found themselves stuck in place, where they were infected. Movement was barely possible due to the fungus restraining and consuming them outside in. One of the officers managed to reach his radio and call for backup, briefly mentioning the fungus in the basement. A similar situation happened twice more. Another set of cops arrived to back up the incapacitated officers. But by the time they arrived, the captured officers were mostly consumed and ready to break into spores. So those cops were caught as well. This raised the severity of the emergency, and the mistake of calling the SWAT team came in. They were trapped, bringing up the number of people from 1 to around 7 now. People transformed into seed beds for the modified basement fungus to grow and spread more. It was then tapped the agency had in the police system picked up the issue and sent a field team to investigate. Getting to the house, the agents quickly realized it was a basement dweller issue, and so triggered the protocols for dealing with such a thing. That was the agency's mistake, and it's clearly what the doctor wanted. This whole experiment was to give the agency a black eye, because he knew how we operated and what the containment protocols were. Isolate the house, set the high-intensity flames, and burn the house to the ground to halt the spread of the fungal growth. Because with a basement dweller, infected hosts are already too far gone. But as the fires were set, all the fungus spasmed when exposed to the open flame, and the whole house blew up like a fuel air bomb. The doctor had turned the basement dweller into a massive explosive. It cost us the whole containment team of 6 agents, including one senior agent who was on site to supervise the burn. The explosion also drew public attention to the site, causing us to scramble for damage control and to keep things contained, because we didn't know if Experiment 41 was still present or if it was blown up with the explosion. And how we knew it was the doctor that did this? Well, aside from the detail of who else would be able to do this to us, aside from the company. Again, he was the one who called the original police report. Secondly, each of the agents had their IDs taken, and in the following day, the local base and their archive accessed using those IDs. The search afterwards was deleted, but we do know that the doctor was looking for something. Whatever it was he was searching for, we pray he didn't get the answers he sought.